Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric Entertaining series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project in the Nintendo 64 core. And today is a fun video because we're playing B3313, which is one of the weirdest ROM hacks in the Mario universe ever. And for the longest time, this did not play on original hardware, nor did it work on MiSTer FPGA, but I received an unsolicited inbox request in my Discord messages, basically telling me that this game was now working on MiSTer and I should check it out. And in hilarious B3313 fashion, I've never talked to that person before, and they never answered me back. That is a true story, but of course this game is supposedly haunted, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. But honestly, getting more games running on the MiSTer core is always going to be a fun time, and when I say B3313 is one of the weirdest, most unexplainable ROM hacks out there, I 100% mean it. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. And that was the first jump scare, but trust me, this game is absolutely filled with them. And when I say this game makes no sense, it's absolutely weird and turns back on itself 100 times, I mean it. The overall geography and layout of the castle is constantly changing, and the game will just basically screw with you at every single twist and turn. And this is basically modeled after some of the betas of Super Mario 64 that were previewed back in the day at trade shows and in magazines. And the story behind this, of course, a fallacy, is that this is a haunted ROM and it actually has an AI that's individualizing and personalizing every single cartridge to your gameplay characteristics. And of course that AI went rogue and is starting to do some very strange things. And honestly, the creepypasta world really isn't one I live in, but I do love a good horror story now and again. And when you can combine it with Mario 64 as well as MiSTer FPGA, I am 100% there for it. Now do be aware that this game can crash in spots, but that's actually intentional. There seems to be a few program crashes that'll actually change the game once you reload it back up on original hardware or on MiSTer FPGA. And I did check, the one crash I did have was supposed to happen, and outside of that, absolutely this game just ran flawlessly on the core. I am playing this on the turbo core because the game has a tendency to slow down on real hardware, so I figured I'd give it the most amount of frames possible. But last time we talked about this game, testing when the core was still work in progress, it would run for maybe 30-60 seconds and absolutely just crash out, and not in the ways the developers intended. It was not a playable experience. Now there's apparently over 600 stars in this game, so I can't tell you that you can actually finish this in the core. All I can tell you is I talked to people that played it on original hardware, and you can get to the quote-unquote end game stages. But this game has so many different endings and so many different weird things going on, you'll never be quite sure if you've actually finished the game. And we found our friend Yoshi here, and he's going to start dropping some of those lore hints on us about just how weird this overall environment is. And that is in fact the case. B3313 is just a strange game, but I actually love what it does. Maybe not so much in the horror aesthetic, but in the overall usage of Nintendo 64 hardware and how the level layout, the castle map, and everything else just constantly changing. Because once you get Luigi and come in here for the first Bowser fight, things are going to absolutely fall off the rails. It does an effective job of kind of leading you by the hand and getting you towards the game that's going to be the strangest part of the experience, but it doesn't start off immediately in that. You can tell that there's something weird and strange going on in the world this game inhabits, but it's not until you beat Bowser for the first time do things really actually open up. From there, once you get 10 stars, things get even weirder. But you saw me fall in that hole, you'll see me kill Bowser here and collect the first red star in the game. And then it's what happens next that just really absolutely is fun from both a technical perspective as well as a video game storytelling perspective. Because if we go back out of the hole after we beat Bowser, suddenly the entire level architecture is different here. There is the pit, but on one end is a door, and on the other end is the door we came in on. That's not what we saw when we first entered this room, and you can jump over this pit here and end up in an area of the castle that's never existed in the game but was shown off in preview builds back when Super Mario 64 was developed, and it just gets weirder and weirder from here. There are hundreds upon hundreds of paths and doors in B3313, some that lead the same place twice and some that will lead you a completely different direction the first and second time you take the door, and it's got a very strange soundtrack. Go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back. Almost sounds like Super Mario 64 music, but also sounds completely disconcerting at the same time. And if you didn't notice, our eel friend there from the original build of the game is now lying at the bottom of the water, and he is 100% dead. It is a little bit of visual storytelling to tell you that things in this version of the game are going to be completely different than you would expect and much darker. And if we run back up to this same door after we end up back in the castle from falling into some pit that I don't even remember where it was, you fall back down into the Bowser fight, but you load back up into the castle again. This is something different and something new. Every time you do an action in B3313, you should expect a completely different result, because we go back in this door here, and now suddenly we have a ramp up to a new set of doors. This is the same area I've retread over and over again so far in the video, but of course things are just going to be completely weird as you move throughout the game. And that is a very technical, fun achievement as well. Trying to manage all of this at once, getting all of these different levels to load in, it makes perfect sense why this game would always crash on consoles in the MiSTer FPGA core. It was doing things with the Nintendo 64 hardware that was never intended to be done, and that's why the de facto way to play this version of the game was always software emulation, because it would support more functions than real Nintendo 64 hardware. But some of the modders went in and made sure you could play this on real hardware as well, and that is awesome. And I would credit everyone down below, but honestly the amount of names are involved in this project is staggering. I couldn't list them all off in a video, and there does seem to be some internal strife between the developers as far as who's actually doing what, where that could be all part of the lore of B3313. You can never really tell, even when they're talking online, what is true and what is just part of the storytelling process, which is actually kind of a fun time. But as we run through this set of doors again, we're in a completely new part of the castle, and this is what I really love. It is loading in all of this data. It's configured to basically change itself up on the fly. In some ways it kind of feels like Portal to me, not in a gameplay aspect, but in that overall trickery. You can actually load into a new area when you're in the existing area. It is just kind of a very strange process. And like I said, every single door is going to be its own mystery. If you actually 100% complete this game, and I feel like it would probably take you hundreds upon hundreds of hours, because you'll see there I went through a pipe and I now dropped down into the actual castle from Super Mario 64. There's so many different versions of Peach's castle, you never know which one you're going to get, and you're always going to find something surprising, and you have to just basically continue to try to do the same action over and over again, expecting a different result, which is the definition of insanity. But here in B3313 it actually does pay off, because there's just basically feeling like an infinite amount of things to do, and this ROM is a large ROM that has so many different new components to it, and the fact that it's running this well on the MiSTer FPGA core is not only a testament to Robert FPGAZumSpass' ability to recreate an entire N64 in code, it's also a testament to the developers that actually patched this thing up to work on real hardware, because again, like I said before, you guys asked me to test this maybe a year ago. I did, and you could get maybe 60 seconds of footage out of it total before it would crash the core, and I tested this on real hardware back in the day as well, and I would get the same result, so it was something that I could replicate. But when I say this game could just be downright creepy and weird, I 100% mean it, and it's really down to the music. 30 seconds and I'll be right back. Again, it sounds like a familiar track from the Super Mario franchise, but it also sounds completely broken and perverted in its own ways, almost like the hardware is having an issue and it's playing some of those samples at the wrong rate or at the wrong frequency. But that is all part of B3313. It feels so familiar yet completely foreign at the exact same time, and that's how this game actually gets its hooks into you. You think you're going to go in and just check out a tech demo, you're going to see what's going on, then suddenly you start getting curious about what the mystery behind this game truly is, and just how far you can actually delve into it. There's so many secret hidden pathways, there's so many different things you can do. Like right here, do we take the one door or do we run up that ramp and see what's going on up there? You're going to get so many branching paths, and you're never going to be sure which one is the right one, and the reality is none of them are the correct path. You just kind of play this game, see how it unfolds, you find an ending, and you decide if you want to go back in and continue to hunt for the next endings, because apparently this game is quote-unquote completed. It is a 1.0 release, but again, there's so so much misinformation out there from the developers from online as to what version is the true version of B3313 and which one you should be playing. It is really hard to say what version this truly even is. And again, I do think that's part of the overall lore of this game, just trying to make it as confusing and as confounding as possible, both in the gameplay as well as the story elements around it. Some areas like this where you find the key, I still have absolutely no idea what to do with it. So if anybody knows, leave me a comment down below, because I've never actually found a use in this area. If there is one, I just haven't figured it out, and maybe it has something to do with that grayed out question mark block on the ground. But that is the fun thing about B3313. You're never going to know what to do, and when you stop playing the game to take a break, it's going to be in the back of your mind just trying to convince you to pop back in for another hour and see what else you can discover. And now you can do that in the MiSTer FPGA core or on real hardware, and that is absolutely amazing, because this thing via software emulation just didn't have the same sort of effect. If you want a haunted Nintendo 64 cartridge, if you wanted to play hauntedly on Nintendo 64 hardware, loading the ROM up in an emulator kind of broke that overall illusion of the quote-unquote haunted video game. But here on MiSTer FPGA, if you pop it into a flash drive on real hardware, that illusion is intact. It feels like your Nintendo 64 is having errors all the time and struggling to keep up with the game, and that kind of makes that haunting aesthetic go a little bit further. And you'll see there, I could have jumped into a pipe, or I could have fallen down this hole, and where does the other path bring me? That is the real thing about this game. You just want to know where everything goes and how it works, but the more you play it, the more questions you're actually going to be presented with, and that is why it is so much fun. It is inexplicably unexplainable in the best ways possible. It is strange and familiar feeling at the same time, and it just makes you think what else you could find in the game. And it is great that you can now play this on MiSTer FPGA, because the Nintendo 64 library isn't the deepest in the world, and a lot of these ROM hacks and fan games are just software emulation only. There are very few that seem to run well on real Nintendo 64 hardware, which is unique to the Nintendo 64. I feel like most other games, fan games at least, will run on their target hardware, but for Nintendo 64, modders seem to make games that just run via emulation to have more power than what was available on the real hardware. And you'll see there's even some weird screen aberration. Not sure if that's in the core, in the game, or what was going on. You can't ever explain away an error or glitch here as just an error or glitch. It could be intentional. And if you want to see more videos like this N64 ROM hacks that work on the core, leave me a comment down below and recommend some games to me. There's a ton out there and I don't know about all of them. But you'll see here we run forward and we find a hidden door in a wall. You can just see the seam, and where does that lead? I may never have any idea. But we are done. I'll see you guys next time. Definitely check this game out. It is 10 out of 10 fun and weird. Bye-bye.